Hey guys, I am back for another video, and this time it's themed a little bit different. It's not as China focused as before, although there is a China connection. My next guest has moved to China, but it's more about his experiences in Jordan as one of the first craft breweries in this particular Muslim country, Jordan. And so we will talk a little bit about Jordan's experience moving. This is Jordan from Jordan, by the way, just to be clear. Originally from the US, but craft brewed in Jordan. And we will talk about his experience coming to China, but that's not going to be the main focus because there's a bit more of an interesting story here about building a craft brewery in a Muslim country. So we'll start with Jordan, with you introducing yourself a little bit about where you came from and how you got in Jordan.
So I'm from Wyoming originally. I started doing home brewing in my garage almost 10 years ago, I think.
Okay.
I just wasn't happy with the craft beer selection locally, and so decided to start making it myself. I think same story as like almost every brewer out there.
Yeah.
And so that just happened to turn into a career for me. The local brew pub liked the beer I was making and offered me an internship, which eventually turned into an assistant brewer position. And then from there, my wife and I decided that we were getting a little too settled in America. And so we were going to essentially spin the globe, apply for every job that we possibly could, and go wherever the cool jobs were.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it was really crazy how I ended up in Jordan because I saw the ad and I thought, this has to be a joke, or like this is some sort of scam and I'm going to figure it out. And so I sent in my resume and I took the interview just to try and like scam the scammer, figure out what's going on here. But it turns out the owner of this brewery, he went to school in the States, got his bachelor's degree at UC Boulder in Colorado. And then got his master's of brewing at UC Davis in California. And so he's actually, a legit brewer. And it turned out he worked in Boulder for a few years after getting his degree at Davis. And we had a lot of the same friend group. So
wow. That's actually kind of interesting. I wonder how many other brewers saw that and they said, there's no way this is real. It's like, come on.
I can tell you from experience in putting new job postings out there while I was working in Jordan, we did not get very many hits. And so,
you think it must have been a similar kind of thing where they're just like, this has got to be a joke. I mean, this is a Muslim country.
And the ad looks great, but at the same time, people thought, Jordan, no way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. But it turned out that me and the owner had this great connection, and we were able to vet each other through our friends. And so everyone I knew from Colorado said that he was a great guy and I should absolutely go do this thing. And, same thing, he talked to his friends, said that he should hire me. And so here I go. We headed out to Jordan.
Did you have to do any convincing, like for your wife, in terms of saying we're moving?
She was actually the one who really pushed me to do the interview and take it seriously.
Did she have some sort of a connection with that country or have an interest in that country? Or it was just like, it was totally different?
It was really just like we were getting far too settled, and we realized that if we didn't leave the States soon, we were never going to leave the States.
Right.
And we wanted to have that life of traveling around the world, working different places, and just like seeing the world. And so it really didn't matter to us where we went, just as long as it was going to be cool and interesting and something totally different from America.
Did you do any kind of, were there any concerns about whether this place would be welcoming to Americans? And did you do any kind of background checking on that? Or were you just like, whatever happens, happens?
Honestly, not so much. I put my full faith in the owner of the brewery.
Okay.
Because he was incredibly welcoming, very hospitable, which I come to learn is like a very Jordanian trait. Hospitality is number one in their values.
Right.
And so he said everything was going to be great and everything would be set up for us. It wasn't exactly that way, but we did put all our faith in him and let him take care of everything for us.
Right. That's interesting.
So we really did almost no research ahead of time. We're just like, Jordan, that's a place. I've seen it on the map. let's pack up and go.
That's interesting. All right, so you pack up. Did you have any friends or families that were just like, "What are you doing?"
Oh yeah, sure, everyone. Like my family actively encouraged me to not go. Not all of my family. My mom was pretty supportive. My dad took a little time to come around, but he eventually was pretty supportive too.
Okay.
But,
did they come and visit you while you were there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Both my parents and my wife's parents came to visit while we were in Jordan. Had a great time. Loved it there. I think both my wife and I, and then our families, we all sort of fell in love with it a little bit.
Oh, wow. Okay. Did you have any sort of expectations going in that when you landed, you were like, oh, wow, this is totally different from what I expected? Or you arrived there just like with no preconceptions about what it would be like?
Yeah, I mean, Jordan's one of those places where you can't watch a YouTube video and figure out what it's going to be like. And so there, for one thing, there's just not that much information except tourist information, which like tourist life and actually living in a country are very different things.
Right.
And so we did a little bit of research and we're like, honestly, I have no idea what's going to happen. And so we just went in, minds open, ready for whatever happened to us.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So now when you get to this brewery, you start brewing for them, you start helping them kind of set things up in a little bit more of a professional manner. You have an on-site tap room also at the brewery that people will come and visit. Is it far from the city or?
Yeah, really far.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Actually. So this was a huge point of contention in my first 6 months at the brewery. The owner, awesome guy, he had a little bit of a misconception about where I would want to live. And so he stuck us right smack in the middle of the city in a really cool neighborhood, kind of a immigrant neighborhood, but not Western immigrants. It's like a lot of Filipinos and Africans. And so it was sort of a like half and half migrant worker and refugee neighborhood.
Okay. But it was far from the brewery.
Like a solid 45, 50-minute drive in traffic.
Okay.
Because the brewery is in the middle of nowhere. Like it's not next to anything. The first question people ask is, oh, what's close? Nothing.
Interesting. But people who were interested in this beer would be driving out to the...
Yeah, sure. And for that reason, we, at least initially, we were only open on weekends because like no one was going to make the trip on a Tuesday night, you know?
Yeah, right. But later on, you opened up during the week.
Yeah, we became popular enough that we had to open on the weekdays. We were honestly turning people away on the weekends. Wow. We had too many people.
Oh, wow.
And
that'd be a pain in the ass because they're driving out and there's nothing else around and you're like, I'm sorry, we don't have space.
And like we would only turn people away if we were incredibly full. Like we were, say, a 30, 40 seat establishment. Right. We would turn people away at like 150.
Wow. And so
because we just had this huge open space outside, and so the bar would get packed immediately.
Right.
But then we just say, hey, like hang out in the driveway and have a beer, and people would be happy to do it. Like that.
But even that got too much.
Yeah. When our entire driveway for our factory is full of people, that was too much.
So I don't know if there are many expats in Jordan, but like, were they mostly locals or?
So the brewery started maybe like 2 or 3 years before I showed up. So I showed up very end of 2015. And I think the brewery started making beer in 2013, 2014, something like that.
Okay.
From what I hear, the first couple years were entirely expat sales, like almost no sales to Jordanians.
Okay.
By the time I got there, it had sort of started to change. They had hired a sales team which was like actively not marketing to expats and like trying to pull in the Jordanian market. But an interesting thing about Jordan is like whatever the expats do, eventually Jordanians will do as well.
You kind of get that in China also. I mean, not so much now, but before you'd have these establishments where when they were full of foreigners, it would pique the curiosity of locals. and then they'd say, "Oh, what's this about?" And then eventually it switches to more Chinese.
Sure. And so, yeah, I mean, like when I started, it was still probably 90% expat, 10% Jordanians. And in the tasting room, it was only expats. Like even people in the town closest to our brewery had no idea that it existed.
And then by the time you left, what was the kind of breakup like in terms of expats versus locals?
If we're talking about like package sales or like sales outside of the brewery, I'd say it was almost flipped, where it was like 90% Jordanian.
Okay, now this is the biggest. This is the biggest curiosity I have at this point, because obviously this is a majority Muslim country.
Sure.
So I know there's a small Christian population. Mm-hmm. Who are most of your customers, like from the local population, in terms of Christian Muslims?
We had a little bit of a don't ask, don't tell policy.
Okay.
Like, the tasting room, we welcome everyone, no matter what, and like we're not gonna say no to anything. But you could tell, based on like context clues, that we served quite a few Muslims.
Okay.
Especially like, you know, like any craft beer in any country, mostly young hipsters.
Okay. Interesting.
So, you know, like Jordan has this sort of thriving underground hipster movement, which is, you know, like very, very new for such a religious conservative country.
Yeah.
And it tends to be non-discriminatory between like if you're Christian or Muslim or whatever, because I'd say like most of the young people who were drinking our beer were pretty secular. And so like didn't really matter what it said on their ID card. They're just
so they would distinguish on Jordanian ID cards. They distinguish which religion they are.
Oh yeah, even me on my residence permit, I had to say that I'm Christian, even though I'm, you know, agnostic, atheist, whatever. Like that's not an acceptable answer. They won't write that. And so they're like white person, Christian.
So in Jordan, why do they do that though? Do you get different? Do you get access to different things?
Actually, there's two different court systems in Jordan. There's a court system for Christians and a court system for Muslims.
Wow. Okay.
And so that doesn't cover everything. So if you're talking about like criminal punishments, you know, theft, murder, these type of things, that goes to the government courts.
Okay. It's more like civil cases.
Exactly. So,
well, what happens if it's like a Christian who's suing a Muslim?
Then it gets really complicated.
I guess so.
But in those cases, I think they would defer to like whoever is making the suit.
Oh, right. Okay.
But the courts are more for like religious things like marriage, property ownership, stuff like that.
Okay, that kind of makes sense, because then it would be in the context of their belief system and everything like that.
Yeah, so the different religious courts really only handle that stuff, and then there's, you know, like civil and criminal court separate. Right.
Now, so there aren't any explicit laws in terms of, so if you had a lot of Muslim customers coming in and drinking beer, there's no law against that though, right?
No. So there's no law against Muslims drinking alcohol. Muslims are not allowed to own an establishment that sells alcohol or produces alcohol.
Okay, so the guy you were working for, he was not...
No, they are like a fairly large, influential Christian family.
Okay.
And because of the laws, the Christian minority has a monopoly over all alcohol production and sales in the country. Right. But if they're only selling to themselves, then this would be a really small industry. But there's a liquor store on every corner, and there's not a Christian on every corner, if you know what I mean.
That's interesting. So now these young kind of hipster Muslims that are coming in and drinking, do you think they're, from a family point of view, did you ever get the sense, I don't know if you got to know them well enough, did you ever get the sense that they had to kind of do this on the down low, like their parents didn't know about it kind of thing? Or I
think it's a case-by-case basis, because like I have a few friends from Jordan, Jordanians who grew up Muslim, but maybe like their families were also very secular.
Okay.
And so, you know, like some of my friends, I've sat down and have had a beer with their parents.
Okay.
And so like, you know, that existed, but not so much. I think a lot of our customer base were like first generation drinkers.
Okay.
And so I know that our place was sort of popular because it was so far out of the way that for the most part, someone who was afraid of their family finding out that they were drinking could come to our bar and not have to worry about running into someone they knew.
Okay.
Unless it was someone from this circle
Right.
of other young people who were doing the exact same thing.
Right. And actually, so that I would imagine the Christian population would be kind of have a little bit more of a history of drinking beer or whatever it is. And the Muslim market that you're talking about, it sounds like they'd be pretty new to the drinking kind of market. So does that create any sort of an environment where, because for craft beer, a lot of people who have been drinking commercial lager for a long time, they don't really understand craft beer. Does it create a system where, because they're coming in with a blank canvas, that they're a little bit more open-minded to craft beer than the Christian people who have been drinking their commercial lagers for a long time?
Yeah, I would say like it would depend on the age group, because like young Christians were just as open-minded as young Muslims about the beer, because like they're drinking beer for the first time. I think they would be more likely to go to like a big domestic lager because that's what their parents are drinking.
Yeah.
And it was like marginally cheaper in the grocery store.
The commercial beer was just only slightly cheaper than the...
Yeah, we're talking like 40 cents US per bottle cheaper.
Oh, wow. Okay. So now I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine in a country like that wouldn't necessarily be friendly from my perspective to alcohol, that the taxes would be pretty high on alcohol. That would probably make up the bulk of the price in my estimation.
Yeah. I'd have to double check the exact numbers, but if I remember right, it's something like $4 or $5 per liter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so like a bottle of beer was actually quite expensive, which is why the margin was so similar between our two companies.
Yeah.
Because
that's
like it's already really expensive.
That's what's making it most.
And so yeah, and so material cost almost didn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
Like we used the best of everything because the price between the best malt and the worst malt made no difference when you have to pay a huge amount of taxes.
That raises a thought. So in terms of material, a lot of craft beer ingredients are different than commercial beers. So you guys are the only craft beer brewery in Jordan. So how does that work? Like, how do you get your ingredients? Is it a difficult task?
Yeah, it was really difficult. So we had to import everything, and there's no like infrastructure for importing. And so what we actually had to do, well, not me, like I'm just the brewer. So I did the ordering and let other people handle all this stuff.
Yeah.
But what we as a company had to do was create a different separate company that was an import-export company to bring in all of our materials. And that company did not have the beer name on that company.
So what would happen if that had the beer name? You'd have people that just wouldn't want to touch it?
We get a lot more hassle from everyone, from the customs agents, from the people who are carrying the shipments, from everyone.
So you had people within society. They probably would disapprove of other Muslims drinking alcohol.
Oh, for sure.
And like, so they don't want to have any part, even if they were making business from transporting your goods and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so this was a problem that we ran into a lot. And so, that's why, so Caracale was the company name, but in reality, it was only a brand under a parent company called Colorado Trading Company. Okay. Because that was like a generic enough name that you could throw it out there and no one would immediately tie it to beer.
Okay, interesting. So did you have to do that? Was it just with importing or across the board with people you dealt with?
Yeah, and so like there was no actual like Caracale company. And so we used that parent company name when we were buying stuff anywhere in the country, when we were like buying stuff from outside of the country, when we were doing sales receipts, selling beer. I mean, like it was sort of the like it was a parent company and covered everything. Okay. And so it made it so that we could do some transactions in areas that were not friendly to alcohol production.
Oh, okay. So like, for example, like what are like contractors coming in to repair things or?
So like contractors were a no-go. That's a different story. We can get to that later.
Okay. Okay.
We're talking about like, since there's no brewing infrastructure in Jordan, we had to build or modify or fix everything in-house.
Okay.
Or import it from outside of the country, which is very expensive.
Oh, wow.
And so if we're talking about like plumbing parts, tri-clamps, laboratory equipment, all this stuff, like all of that we could source in Jordan, but it could only come from companies that could not know that we were producing alcohol.
Interesting. So you have, first of all, have the problem that there's no brewing equipment, kind of people who can fix beer equipment. You have to use custom solutions, and then you have to hide from those custom solution providers what you're doing. Yeah.
So we ended up buying a lot of dairy equipment under the guise of a dairy farmer. Every time we went out, it was a little different. I got a lot of funny looks because it's like, why does some dairy have an American coming with? But I just claimed to be like a biochemist or something like that.
Wow. Okay.
And so we would, if anyone asked any questions, we'd say, oh, we're a dairy, or we make juice, or we do soda or something like that.
That's interesting.
Something acceptable.
Did you ever have a situation where you got caught out?
Not me, but one of our drivers, who was not briefed well enough when he went to pick up some parts, said, oh yeah, we're that beer company. And the guy said, I'm going to keep these parts and I'm never going to see you again.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so like we lost a really valuable source that day.
So you got to brief everybody who works for you saying, do not tell them we're making beer.
Yeah. And it turns out some people are better at lying than others. But
wow.
For the sense that I got talking to some of these shop owners, it was more like they don't want to know. They don't want to have a conscious thought that they're supporting beer, but like they know there's something fishy about us because they're like, we don't recognize your company name and we know all the dairies in this country.
I would imagine you'd probably have some people in the middle who were like, they maybe suspected something, but they're like, I'm getting some business. I'll turn a blind eye to this.
Exactly.
But then you had the hardline guys that were like, no, I don't care. You're not. I'm not supplying you.
Yeah. So those guys we had to be really careful with. Other people we just had to make sure we never said it out loud. Because like maybe they knew, but
it was an unspoken.
It was plausible deniability.
So it's almost like they're protecting myself. I'm still going to be okay with my religion and everything.
Yeah. Like so if someone were to call them out and say, "Hey, you sold parts to the brewery," they say, "I didn't know."
Yeah, like a blissful kind of thing.
No one said that.
That's interesting. And then so the contractor thing that you were talking about also.
Yeah. So that's a long story. So when they started building the brewery, once again, like a few years before I showed up, they had a lot of contractor issues because there's very, very, very few Christian contractors in the country.
Okay.
And so you don't necessarily get to choose what the religion of who you're hiring to do a job, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite that tight-knit. And so they would get someone in to say, I don't know, like install the water filtration system or install the tile in the brewery, like basic stuff. And the tile one is really funny because they got a guy in, paid him up front. He started tiling the brewery, made it halfway through, and they started bringing in some equipment, and he figured out what it was, and he dropped his tools and said, that's it, I'm done with this job, and walked out, job halfway done, all the money in his pocket.
No way.
And so they ended up having to hire someone else. And so you can't see it anymore because we redid the floor a couple years ago. But for a while, there were two entirely different tile patterns in the brewery. And it was very easy to see, like, this is where one guy laid tile and this is where another guy laid tile.
This is the hardline guy? Whose quality was better? Or is more or less the same?
Neither was very good, if I'm being honest.
Wow, that's interesting.
And so,
actually, that raises an interesting question. So there's these limitations where certain people will do certain things. In Jordan, are there any discrimination laws or anything where if you wanted to specifically hire a Muslim, are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to say, I only need to hire a Muslim, or I only need to hire a Christian, or it's really kind of a gray area?
To the best of my knowledge, you're not allowed to, but does it happen? Absolutely.
Yeah, it must, yeah.
Yeah. And especially when it concerns alcohol, the whole legal realm is one big gray area, because there aren't that many laws to begin with, and they kind of want to like ignore that it exists. And so it's kind of the Wild West law wise when it comes to alcohol. You can kind of do whatever you want until you get caught, and then good luck suing the other person.
Right. Yeah. So you've got this passive issue of suppliers not willing to deal with you or stopping a job halfway.
Yep.
Was there any aggression in terms of people that weren't necessarily dealing with you, but that said, "Oh, I don't like this"?
Yeah. I mean, that definitely happened, especially early on, when people thought like this is a small startup company. If we're angry enough, we can get them shut down. And so there were a lot of threats on Facebook because. Unlike China, everything happens on Facebook in Jordan. Like, Facebook is life in Jordan.
Really?
And especially for us as a brewery, there were laws against advertising in anything but online formats as an alcohol production company.
Okay, so you could only advertise on Facebook. That's obviously where they'd come after you also.
Exactly. So no print, no TV, no radio. And so Facebook was life for us.
Okay.
And so, that's where we saw all of the negative comments and death threats on a regular basis.
Wow.
Which most of it was just, trolls.
Yeah.
But not while I was there. It was maybe like a couple months before I got there. There were actually some shots fired at the brewery, and there's like a few bullet holes on the backside of the warehouse.
Oh, so they didn't shoot at anybody. They just wanted to leave their mark.
No, it was like middle of the night. There's obviously no one there except for we have a couple like resident security laborer type guys who stay overnight. And so they heard the shots, and I mean, it wasn't a legitimate threat. It was just sort of a warning as to like, you guys need to stop.
Did that make anybody in the company worry or anything like that, or was it like you just knew they were just kind of marking their terror, like just kind of?
What? It's tough to get a sense of, because one thing about Jordanians is they don't like to tell you anything negative ever, and so it's really hard to tell if someone is scared or worried about something, because they're going to tell you that everything's perfect.
Okay.
And so you kind of have to like guess from subtext on that.
So based on your guesstimation, was there any worry?
So I will say they did increase security quite a bit.
Okay.
Installed some extra gates, and like in all of my dealings with the company, like the whole time I was there, security was always like the number one question when we were bringing in new people. And so I think it did have a little bit of an impact on them. They wanted to make sure like we were really vetting people, and some of the people in the company were not comfortable with having a bar on site because they said, well, then anyone can get in and we might have a terrorist attack in our bar.
Right.
Which, fair. Like it's kind of hard to vet people driving into your driveway and drinking beer on your porch.
It is so I'm going to admit my ignorance here. I don't know too much about Jordan at all, but is there a terrorism problem in Jordan, or not so much as the surrounding areas?
The government would have you believe that there is not.
Okay.
But, and truth be told, there really isn't that much.
Like kind of comparatively speaking kind of thing?
If you want to compare it to the rest of the region, then no.
Jordan's pretty safe in that regard.
Yeah, actually, like the expats like to call Jordan the Hashemite kingdom of boredom.
Okay.
Because nothing ever happens there.
Right. Okay.
But there were like a few terrorist stirrings while I was there. ISIS made it down into the country a few times.
Wow. Okay.
But just like really minor factions, and mostly recruiting, because they knew Jordan was like not really worth taking, and also it would be a really hard fight.
Okay.
because basically every country that has a military presence in the Middle East is stationed in Jordan. And so there's
Okay.
hundreds of thousands of foreign soldiers in Jordan at any given time.
Okay, so that almost acts as a kind of protection for
Yeah,
them.
and so that works pretty well as a buffer.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. Were you close to any of the borders? Like,
No, I mean, we were pretty close to the Palestine border, I guess. It was like maybe 45-minute drive.
Okay. Yeah.
I say 45-minute drive. I could see the Palestine border from my apartment. It was a lot of twists and turns down into the Dead Sea Valley.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so we were maybe like 5 kilometers as the crow flies.
Right. Okay.
But that since the peace treaty between Jordan and Israel, like that has been a really quiet border, and so that was like not even remotely unsafe.
Okay.
If you're talking about more dangerous borders, we were at least 100 plus kilometers from Syria,
Okay.
and so no real worries about anything there.
Did you know? During your stay, did you see any kind of inflow of people from Syria during the conflict there, or?
Yeah, sure. We had a few people, Syrian refugees, like drinking beer in our bar.
Oh,
and
no
so we,
way.
chat them up.
Were they Muslim also?
We don't ask.
Yeah. Okay. I guess that's
Yeah.
a good policy in a bar in a Muslim country. Is we
Yeah.
don't ask what religion you are.
Yeah, and so like unless a woman is walking in a hijab, or it's someone that we personally know, then there's no real way to tell if someone's.
So you had women walking in with hijabs that are coming to.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't exactly an everyday occurrence, but it happened at least a couple times a month.
Like they come in and they just like they.
Yeah, sure. The couple that I talked to one really amazing lady who was actually Iraqi, but working in Jordan. And so she's like, no one's ever going to find me.
So I'm gonna have a beer.
Yeah.
Did she drink before that? I don't know if she told you or.
Yeah, and honestly, like Iraq is one of the looser Muslim countries with alcohol as well.
Oh, okay.
And so, it would happen. Like I said, not every day, but we were just as welcoming to women walking in with a hijab as to anyone else.
That's interesting.
Yeah, we really wanted to put it out there that we were a safe space for anyone.
Okay.
No matter what your background, where you're from, what your beliefs, anything, our bar is neutral ground.
That's remarkable. So you would have Christians and Muslims and everybody from all different walks of life drinking together in the same space.
Yeah, we'd get pretty regular stream of Israeli Jews as well.
Okay.
Because it's not like common knowledge, but there's a lot of Israeli tourists in Jordan. Which, I mean, it makes sense once you think about it because they're right there.
Mm.
But being the only craft brewery in the country, we got this amazing cross section of everyone in the country in our bar at any given time.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Because especially expats, every expat in the country wants good beer, and there's only one place to get it. Wow. And so, yeah, we basically met everyone.
That almost sounds like you created what seems like almost an institution that is not available anywhere else. Because I mean, maybe there are other public facilities where Muslims and Christians might go, but here you've got a place where they're coming, they're drinking together. Yeah. On the Muslim side, they're doing something that technically they're not supposed to be doing, and so it creates kind of this underground feel. And this is how I'm picturing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So our bartenders were always Jordanian, and talking to them, they're the ones who bring in a lot of people, and so. They said, yeah, I mean, it's sort of this place where people can get away from their family, get away from societal expectations and sort of let loose a little bit.
That's amazing. That's remarkable. Are there any more craft breweries there opening now, or are you still that one is the only one?
I've heard rumors of a brew pub opening up, but I haven't kept up too much on the news since I left.
So now, so we're bringing this to kind of a close. You came to China. How long have you been in China for now?
What is it? 4 months now?
4 months. Okay.
Yeah.
And what brought you here?
Well, so my wife was working in Jordan as well. She was working as a school counselor.
One second. Yeah. Okay, I just have to fix the phone there for a second, so we're gonna have to re-continue on that last question.
Sure.
But let's pour some more beer. I should probably mention this beer is a beer that you brewed in my brew pub in Shenzhen.
Yeah.
So it's a New England IPA, and if anybody's in Shenzhen or coming through Shenzhen, come into Taps to try this beer. Fair game, eh? Nobody sponsors this. It's only me. So here we go. But this is beautiful. This is a really nice beer. Really juicy. Typical kind of New England IPA, East Coast IPA kind of flavors. Yeah. But let's have a little bit of a drink first. Cheers.
Cheers.
So let me get back to that question before I had to double check on the phone there.
Yeah, sure.
But so yeah, you've been in China for 4 months now, and what is it that brought you here?
Yeah, so like I was saying, my wife was also working in Jordan. She was working as a school counselor in an international school, like, 90% of the expats out there working in international school. I won't say too much about her and her job situation, but it was just starting to stagnate, and she was not really enjoying it too much anymore. And so we decided it was time to get out. And we sort of have this deal going where we take turns moving for each other's jobs. And so we moved to Colorado for her job. We moved to Jordan for my job. And now she took a job in China, and so here we are in China moving for her job.
Okay.
And so she's working at another international school in the Nansha district of Guangzhou.
Okay, got it. Did you kind of come to China without any expectations, or when you arrived here, was it kind of different from what you expected?
No, it was definitely a different experience because I've actually been to China a couple times before. And so I sort of knew what to expect. That being said, I'd only been to Shanghai and Beijing.
How long ago was that?
So I was in both those cities in May this year.
Oh, okay.
And then I was in Shanghai last year as well.
Okay, got it.
And so I more or less knew what to expect. What I wasn't quite ready for was the heat and humidity down here in the south.
South is very humid. It's like, it's like 90% humidity in the summer. It's crazy.
Yeah, because I thought Shanghai was hot. And then came down here and was like, ooh.
Yeah, no, it takes some getting used to.
It took a while to get used to not wearing socks for months on end, and putting all of my pants away.
Yeah. Oh, you got to wrap things up here. I mean, it's like even a cereal. If you open a box of cereal and you don't close it properly, by the next day it's soggy. The humidity is unbelievable.
Yeah, so that took a little bit of getting used to, especially coming from Jordan, which is polar opposite. So we were living not quite in the desert. We were in the northern part of the country, which is actually fairly fertile and has a lot of farmland.
Okay.
But it is on a Mediterranean climate, and so you get 6 to 8 months of no rain. And so it's not super hot. It's 32, 33 most days in the summer, and then all the way down to maybe 18 at night.
Okay.
And so really pretty mild, 10% humidity, very nice climate, even in the summer.
Right, yeah.
So to come from that to, Sweat City down here.
It took me so long to get used to. I remember the first time I visited Shenzhen, it was October. October 2007 or 2008, and it was one of the hottest Octobers they ever had, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, how can anybody live here?
Yeah.
And that was kind of reversed. I mean, I'm from Toronto, right? And I can't imagine living back there, going through their winters there.
Yeah.
Toronto. I said that like a Torontonian. I'll tell you an interesting story. There was a guy I met in Shanghai, and he said he was from Canada also. He was wearing shorts in the middle of the winter in Shanghai, and I'm like, this guy must be Canadian. So I'm in the airport, and I said to him, where are you from? He said, I'm from Canada. And then I said, whereabouts in Canada? And he said, Toronto. He pronounced the last T, and I'm like, no, you're not from Toronto. And he's like, well, I'm from Hamilton, just outside of Toronto. And I said, he said, how do you know? I said, because you didn't say Toronto. That's how we say it, Toronto. Nice. But yeah, no, I can't imagine living in that cold climate anymore. But for you, just arriving here, it was
a lot. And you would think, coming from a hot country, I'd be used to it, but it is just a totally different heat.
Yeah.
And it goes away at night, which is a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I hear you on coming from a cold area. Like talking to my family, the high this week was minus 20 Celsius.
Minus 20 Celsius.
Yeah.
Wow, that's even colder than in Ontario right now, where my parents are.
Yeah, I mean, they live up in the mountains in Wyoming.
Okay.
And so they're like high elevation, high-ish latitude.
Yeah.
So it just combines to really cold.
Yeah. Now, in terms of everything else, in terms of the mannerisms, in terms of society, in terms
yeah, sure. And so I think like my first time in Shanghai, it took a little getting used to. It's a little bit of culture shock coming from an Arabic country. But yeah, I was sort of ready for like the payment systems and the traffic and the language a little bit and the food, the culture, all that stuff. Like I had already experienced it a couple times, and I already had a number of friends in China, and so it was almost like just settling in to somewhere that I already knew.
Yeah.
And so it was much easier transition than moving to Jordan.
So based on how you described how Jordanians are, like they just kind of, say everything's okay. Yeah. I would imagine there's a little bit more, and correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit more of a bluntness here. Like people are just a little bit more just direct. You don't have to kind of guess here. Like people let you know what they're thinking.
Yeah, I would say honest. People are very, very honest.
Yeah.
Which is totally 180 from Jordan.
Yeah.
Because like I said, hospitality is their like number one value. And so especially to us foreigners, like we're permanent guests, right? And so everyone wants to treat us really nice and make sure that we're happy all the time. Oh, wow, and so like no one wants to give you any bad news.
Yeah.
And I ran into this in my company constantly because I'd be like, when is the shipment showing up? Oh, tomorrow, inshallah, which inshallah means if God wills it.
Okay.
And be like, no, when is it actually showing up?
Yeah.
Tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? Maybe next week.
There is a little bit of that here. Like you have this, like, a famous word they always use is chabador, just like more or less. There is a flexibility there, but with everything else, there definitely is an honesty. And while they are very welcoming to foreigners here, and they do want to make sure foreigners are happy here, and generally locals are. There's a bluntness, there's an honesty. Like, if you don't see somebody here, a local Chinese, and like 2 months later you've gained a little bit of weight, they'll tell you. They say, "Wow, what happened? Why are you so fat now?" It's like direct, and you kind of learn to love it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. You get to a point, you don't have to guess what people are thinking here.
Yeah,
and there's just an honesty, a rawness that I really appreciate about it.
Because I almost had to train the staff at the brewery to give me the real news. Like, tell me if something's bad, like I want to know. Yeah. Because my job is to manage all you guys and to fix problems and to like keep this place flowing and moving forward. And I can't do that if you tell me everything's okay all the time.
No. If my staff, if they've got a problem or something's happening, they'll come right out and they'll say, "This is bad. We get a problem."
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. And so, when I first showed up, we'd have crazy things like, bottles exploding on the line. They'd be like, "What's the problem here?" "Oh, no problem." A bottle just blew up and threw shards everywhere. Like, clearly there's a problem.
Yeah.
But so it was a real, I think it was a cultural awakening for me and a cultural awakening for them, that they were like, "Oh, you actually want to know these things." Like, yeah, I really do.
That's interesting.
Even with each other, people are trying to like put the most positive spin on everything all the time, which like I can appreciate that. If you want to always be on the positive side, great, but you can't just ignore everything else, which was where I always had a problem. Because it's like, if you want to tell me that the country's economy is doing great, like that doesn't really affect me personally. But if you tell me that the bottling line isn't broken when clearly it's broken,
Yeah.
then we have a problem because we can't move forward from here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, that's interesting. Huh. So yeah, that's definitely a cultural difference. I think you'll notice here. There definitely is an honesty, a rawness here. So now, after 4 months here, so you were in Jordan for how many years?
Almost 4.
Almost 4. Okay.
Yeah.
So at this point, 4 months into China, do you see that it's compatible enough with you where you're going to be here for a
Oh,
while?
sure. And my life is still in flux right now. Like I'm still figuring out what my role in China is going to be.
Yeah.
It's the nature of a trailing spouse. Like you got to kind of figure your life out.
Yeah.
But my wife is doing great. She loves her school. I think as a counselor, she also loves how direct people are.
Yeah.
Because it makes her job
Well,
easy.
it gets right to the point. Yeah.
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 Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that we decided to go with China is because I'd already been here a couple times and I knew I liked it. And so I said, when we were going over options, it was like, listen, you seem to like this job in China. I know I like it. I know you're going to like it. I think we can do great things here. And so, yeah, I'm ready to be here for a while and, wherever my life goes.
Interesting. One thing I'm curious about is, so you had a lot of family and friends who were against you going to Jordan. When you said you were moving to China, did you get any resistance for family and friends, or were you already at a point where it's like, okay, this guy can go anywhere?
So it was less resistance this time.
Okay.
I will tell you though, so when we finally made our decision, we said, okay, we are going to move to China, and she accepted the job offer. I called up my mom and said, okay, Mom, that we've been looking over different places we're going to go. I said, we've decided to move to China. And she didn't even have words. Her response was, ugh.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because there's a really negative kind of anti-China sentiment throughout the media and everything, right?
I don't want to throw my mom under the bus.
Okay.
It's because
careful.
It's honestly because we had been looking at a lot of European locations.
Okay.
And I think that she was really excited about coming to visit us in Europe, and then we threw her a 180 and went to China instead. And so I think that she was just disappointed for her own personal reasons, not because we were moving to China.
Well, I'm always curious. I'm constantly asking my family in Canada and everything like that, how do they feel about China? How's the media portraying it and stuff like that? Do you think that played any part of it where, right now there is kind of an anti-China campaign going on media, worldwide? Do you think that played, or it was more just she was just really looking forward to going to Europe? And
I think, yeah, she was kind of hoping we were going to get out of Asia.
Okay.
Because talking to her since then, she's been really interested in what I'm learning about Chinese culture and how I'm going through the language, and she's talking about coming to visit, and
that's
and
great.
So I don't think that she had any real negative connotation of China.
It was just
itself.
She had her mind set on Europe at that point.
Exactly. So like I said, I don't want to throw her under the bus.
Well, so I mean, I would imagine your parents didn't have any idea about Jordan before you went also, and when they visited you, was it a real good opportunity for them to kind of change their perspective on Jordan as well?
Yeah, sure. And with my mom at least, we had a great opportunity after we'd been living in Jordan about 6 months. We had a Jordanian friend who was going on vacation to Yellowstone Park, which is in my back door or backyard, whatever you want to say. And we were going to be there at the same time. And so I was like, dude, you have to come with me. I'll show you the park, and then we're going to go home and you can meet all my family. And so he's, a secular Muslim. One of the things that brought us together was drinking beer.
Okay.
And so, for him to meet all of my family on their home turf, and for them to see he's a great guy, he's funny, he's really nice, he brought people gifts, and so I think that was the first step towards changing everyone's mind.
Yeah, that's really great. I love hearing stories like that because it's so easy to shape somebody's mind about somebody
Mhm.
without them knowing anything about that person, about that group of people, or whoever's being villainized at that moment. And so
And
for them to see firsthand,
yeah,
I love hearing stories like that.
I did sort of like bury the lead a little bit with them because I didn't tell anyone that he was Muslim when he came to visit.
Okay.
And so, like, not until the end of his visit. And I think that everyone was just expecting him to be Christian because I was like living in a Christian community and working in a Christian company. And I was like, oh, by the way, Ziad is Muslim. And everyone's like, oh, really? That's very interesting. Like,
That's actually that's
yeah,
an interesting way to approach it.
because it was like, I don't want you to think of him as like,
Right.
oh, there's
No.
that Muslim guy. Like, you get to know him as a person, and then that's just one facet, right?
That's probably an even more effective way to do it. I mean, if you talk about any other group of people, like, so for example, right now, in my perspective, there's very much of an anti-Chinese campaign going on. It's not like you could bring somebody over from China and pretend they're not Chinese. It's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting way to approach it, where you let them get to know him as a person first, and then
Yeah.
drop that bomb and say,
Yeah, because I knew that like my family was a little bit sensitive about it. I mean, I had faith in them. Like they're good people, but you know,
I
people
totally,
can have
I
prejudices.
totally understand.
Yeah,
I mean, so for my father's from England, and I would say that my father's mother wasn't exactly impressed when he married an ethnic minority from
Sure.
Guyana. And I don't hold it against her. She's lovely, but because she's within the family, I kind of understand and I make allowances for it. And then on my mother's side, it's the same thing in Guyana. You know, in Guyana, you have two ethnic groups. You have the blacks and the Indians, the Africans and the Indian descent. And there was a lot of contention between them a lot now. It's gotten a lot better now.
yeah,
But with the older generation, like with my grandmother, once in a while you'll catch her saying something, and it's like, just make sure you don't say that in public. And maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe it wasn't to that point, but
no, it was just sort of like a lack of knowledge about the world in general. You know, and only getting info about the region from the news. And so, like,
that's the key, isn't it? It's
yeah.
not necessarily that you have a lack of faith in them. It's just that you know what they've been inundated with.
Because like the news's goal is to get more viewers, and so like they're only going to show sensationalist stuff. And so if that's the only info you have on the Middle East, then like you're going to miss this whole wide swath of other stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I think having him visit was a real eye opener for them, and like they've now given him an open door policy. Like anytime he's welcome in their house.
That's so great.
So yeah, they were already sort of like into it when they came and visited us in Jordan.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's actually like really amazing people here, and so by that point we also knew where to take them, and like we showed them an amazing week across the country, and so. Yeah, like I said, all of us sort of fell in love with the country a little bit.
Yeah, you almost wish that more people could have that chance, have that, to prove their misconceptions wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great that your family got that opportunity, and it really says something for if other people had that same opportunity, what it could do to kind of bring people together more and kind of break down these divisions, which are in many cases artificially created by the media, like you said. Based on the idea that sensationalism sells, and it's true. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was really the only reason behind so many people being against us moving to Jordan, is because they're like, they didn't even know anything about Jordan.
Yeah, all
they knew was about the Middle East. We would say, like, tell us one thing about Jordan. Like, I don't know. It's next to Syria. It's like, okay, you got one thing. It's like, okay, there are some really big problems in the Middle East, and like Jordan has its own problems too, but it's an amazing, peaceful, like safe country, and with so much cool stuff to see.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, that's really great that they got that opportunity. And then now they're going to be able to see that when they come visit you in China again, all over again. And
yeah, my dad's reaction to me saying we were moving to China was, just tell me how to get a visa.
if another 4 or 5 years later you move to another country, and if it's even more obscure or whatever, eventually I think your family's going to get to a point where it's like, all right, good, I get another chance to prove my misconceptions wrong.
Yeah, sure.
It's like,
I mean, I think everyone who came to visit us in Jordan like really had their eyes open, and I'd say my mom especially, she's like, I need to be a world traveler now. Like,
that's amazing.
I want to see.
I mean, I've never been to Jordan. After hearing your story, I mean, I want to travel there. I want to go see it. So.
It's a cool place.
Yeah.
Like I would suggest, if anyone has the time and resources to check it out, they should go. Go and see it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, on that note, I think we've got an event we've got to go to also, a tap takeover here. So we'll wrap it up here. But that was,
Well, I will say thanks for giving me the opportunity to make this beer.
It turned out really great. So thank you for brewing it with us.
Yeah, I was honestly, I was a little bit worried because I'd never quite done this style before. We had a lot of restrictions in what we could brew in Jordan.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it wasn't like legal restrictions or anything like that. It was just there's no refrigeration around the country, and we had to pasteurize everything. And so to have like a super juicy, unfiltered, unpasteurized, hazy IPA, like that, we couldn't do it. Like, we talked about it, we kicked the idea around for years, could not make it work in the market.
Yeah.
And so like to finally get to make one of these. Thanks.
Well, cheers. Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, we'll see you next time, and we're going to go out to drink a little bit more beer, but I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.